Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. It means a lot to my family and, of course, my dad to see you all here, and of course everybody that's watching online. I really thank you for being here with us today to commemorate my dad, Andrew, Andy, Pops, as we called him. And, so I'm going to have Chris step up and say a few words. We were talking about it last night, about what he wanted to say and what we all wanted to say. And Chris's immortal words were, "I'll just wing it." So, go for it, buddy.
Okay, I just want to remember the happy moments that me and my dad had together and some of the funny moments. I remember back when we went to a hotel and we were walking by the hotel pool, and my dad decided to jump in without notice and didn't realize that he had his room key on him, and he ended up ruining the room key and had to get another room key. And I also remember another funny moment when me, my brother Tim, and Dad went on a bicycle out to the ocean, and we went so far out that my dad got scared, and so we decided to come back in, and we weren't moving, and my dad and me convinced Tim to jump in the ocean where there were jellyfish, and he kept worrying that he was going to get stung. And finally, Tim was able to bring us in. And I remember another moment in another hotel where we were outside and we had the umbrella stuck to the sand, and we went in for lunch, and sure enough, right after lunch, we discovered that our umbrella went up in the air and into the ocean, and my dad went racing out after the umbrella, and once it hit the ocean, he just gave up on it. That's it.
Yeah, my dad was a character. He was definitely a character, and what we loved about him is that he was often the brunt of the joke. You know, he took the brunt of the joke, and he did it gracefully. We had, between Chris, myself, my mom, and Dad, we used to call ourselves the Griswolds, because no matter what we did, there was always some kind of little mishap or something going on, and of course, we love to blame our dad for these things, and he took it like a champ, because that's just the kind of guy he was. He found a lot of humor in just about everything. So, and I think that kind of runs through our family, you know. I like to say, pardon my French, we're a bit of a ball-busting family, but it's just the way we've always been, and Dad's always been great about being pretty lighthearted with jokes at his expense, and he'd have it no other way. I have a few words. Well, actually, if there's, Bob, do you want to say a few words first? We can sit down if you like.
Okay.
I decided not to wing it. Thank you all for coming. Most of you knew Andy. Knew him as a gentle soul, kind, with a good sense of humor, as Tim pointed out. I sent an email around to a lot of his high school classmates, and they kind of circulated it through their network. And just about every response that came back, as I was kind of seeing them in the email chains, all said that he was this kind soul, and a guy with a great sense of humor. And while that's true, as the younger brother, I saw another side of him as well, which I thought I might tell you a little bit about. When we were kids, we had a really huge neighborhood. We had the Rileys next to us. They had 13 kids. There was another family with 7. We had 4, and there were scattered others. So there was always something going on. And just by coincidence, one of his classmates who lived behind us was a family of 3 girls. She just sent an email, giving her condolences, and told the story of the neighborhood. And I didn't realize the head count, but she said there were 9 boys and the rest were girls, and that there was always something going on in the neighborhood. There was always a game of, and it was always the big kids against the little kids, and I was a little kid. And lots of, as Tim's words always come, a lot of hijinks that went on. And one summer we decided, wouldn't it be a great idea to have a BB gun fight? Probably not a great idea. One kid had more welts on his face. How he didn't get blinded, I don't know. But just before the big showdown, Andy and I were just kind of standing in the neighbor's driveway, and all of a sudden, he reaches into his waistband and pulls out a BB gun, points it at me, and he says, "I'm going to count to 3." Well, I turned and ran like a jackrabbit, and I hear 1, 2, and I got a sting in my butt. He never quite made it to 3. So that wasn't that kind, gentle soul that you guys all know about. The one other incident that I kind of recall, and there were a lot, because he had a great imagination, and he was always making up games for us to play. But we went to a music school, summer music camp. That was just up the road, but we'd take a bus to it. And Andy, who was quite a good musician, and he started out playing the cello when he was a kid, but it turned into the guitar and the drums, and he played the bass fiddle and the banjo, and if it had strings, he could play it. And I played the trombone. I didn't know what to do with a string. But the cello, the camp let them, the kids who played cello, keep it at the camp overnight. And we'd take a bus back and forth. But I had to lug this trombone with me. And from the bus stop to home was maybe a half a mile. And there were 4 boys in our family, and we all turned out to be runners, distance runners. And our 2 other brothers, who were older, had kind of established themselves as pretty good runners in high school. So Andy and I thought we'd follow in those footsteps, and we'd get off the bus, and he said, "Let's race home." Now, I was probably 11, and he was maybe 15 or 10 and 14, something like that. And I said, "Great," except I had the trombone in my hands, right? So he'd give me a little bit of a head start, but he always made sure to beat me, you know. And it was a great race, but he always wound up winning, and I always wound up crying. So that was the other kind thought I have of my good dear brother. But no, he was terrific. I'm getting to page 3. So, as a younger brother, it was interesting with 4 boys. The 2 oldest were a lot older, and I hardly remember them growing up. As we got older, we became closer in an odd way. But Andy and I were pretty close until he decided he liked girls. And then I was just an annoying little brother. Well, he wound up marrying his high school sweetheart, Cindy, and they raised these 2 guys over here, and I think they did a pretty terrific job of it. And I think it's most evident in how they took care of them in the last year or 2. It was really difficult, and both Chris and Tim were just phenomenal. So thank both of you.
Well, I'm going to do a bit of a hybrid here from winging it to a few notes that I wrote down. So, again, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. It's really special to have close friends and family. I haven't seen my cousins in many, many years, Rebecca and Peter. It's great to have you guys here, and of course everybody that's watching online and that could be here in person. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to our family, and I know to Andy as well. We've had a flood of condolences, obviously via Facebook and different forums. Bob getting a lot of emails from old friends that my dad hasn't seen, and one friend in particular, Alex Magley, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, that lives in New York, was a really good friend of my father and would call him often, almost weekly, particularly towards the end there, and just always asking about him. And so it's really comforting to know that even after all of these years, he had friends and my friends that really cared for him and appreciated being around him. My dad was the kindest, sweetest man I've ever known. He was the third son in a family of four, Bob mentioned. His brothers Bill, Jack as we called him, John, my dad Andy, and Bob. And they all seemed to excel in some sport or musical ability their whole life. And I think that sort of passed down to Chris and I and through the family. Dad excelled in track quite a bit, as my uncle mentioned. He went to the University of Maryland, and from what I'm told anyway, there's no medals that I can seem to find, but apparently, according to my dad, he set a few records there at the University of Maryland running long distance, the mile, the 2 mile, and cross country. And all of my uncles, for the most part, had Uncle Jack was a very avid cyclist and runner. Bob was a runner, and I ran track in high school as well. And Chris and I played a lot of soccer and baseball growing up, and always enjoyed sports. And Mom and Dad were there for every game that I can remember. They were always present, and we grew up in just a very loving household. As my uncle mentioned, my dad and Mom were high school sweethearts, and they got married at a young age and had this wrecking ball here pretty young. And so they endured a lot early on, and but through it all, I never remember a harsh word spoken or an angry moment growing up that I can remember. Now, back in those days, when you trashed your room or you ran away, you did get the belt, and I remember a couple of those just to kind of keep me in line. But apart from that, he was a very, very loving and caring man, and kind and funny, and always enjoyed a joke and had a great sense of humor. And of course, all through our family, we try to keep that lightheartedness through life. You know, life can be tough and throw you some curveballs, but I think if you stay in the moment and be present in that moment, humor can make a lot of difficult decisions and difficult times a little easier. Growing up, I remember the patience that my father had. It's not something I'm particularly known for, but he was such a patient man. And of course, with 2 boys. He had his hands full. So I remember the time that they got us a go-kart when we were young. And if you remember, Chris, it was a little 2-seater go-kart. And we wreaked havoc on the neighborhood pretty good, often ripping up neighbors' lawns and carving paths that weren't meant to be carved. They also got us a couple of mopeds, which it almost seemed they were asking for trouble when they did this, based on the golf or the go-kart incidents that we had. But there was a late-night moped excursion that resulted in the cops being called and Mom and Dad having to drive all the way across town to come pick us up because we were out. We snuck out. In fact, if any of you recall, the house that we used to live in Anderson had a little balcony outside the back of my bedrooms and Chris's bedroom, and so we would tie a little knotted rope and shimmy down the back thing to get out. And we would always take the mopeds out at like midnight, 1 o'clock, and be the only people on the road, and obviously, causing trouble, spitting at each other in the wind, one behind the other, all that. But it was always easier getting down off that balcony than it was up. And sneaking in the house wasn't an option because my parents' bedroom was right at the door, right? So there was no way we were gonna get in there easily. And I remember climbing up that knotted rope to try and get back up into my room, and probably put a hand up on it and then fell and boom. And so that I'll never forget that. My dad mentioning that the next morning. Did you hear that loud noise last night? Did that wake you up? I don't know what that was. It wasn't thunder. No, Dad, that was me hitting the air conditioning unit, falling about 10 feet. But I think it was what I admired most about my dad was his ability to listen. And I think it came from his many years as a salesman and being on the road and talking with a lot of people. And he worked as a hardware wholesaler. So he would sell tools for House Hansen to the Home Depot or wherever, Lowe's, Ace Hardwares, things like that. And I'll never forget as a kid, this was before the internet days and everything. So he would travel around with this book. Was about that thick, and it had a big leather bound on it with the handles and everything. But this book had every tool you can imagine pictured and written in this book. And for the love of God, I don't know how he did it, but for 30 years he lugged this book around so heavy. And I remember he would come home late at night. He'd be home, 7 o'clock. Of course, my mom, the angel that she was, would have dinner ready for him and everything. But his day wasn't done yet. He had to then take all the orders that he got that day and put it into it was a modem at that time. It was kind of like 2 ear cups, and you'd put the phone in, and he'd dial the number, and you'd hear this. And we heard that through our dinner for the next 30 minutes. This, and but all his orders would be sent for the day, and then he'd be done. But I always remember him just being able to have that ability to just listen to other people. He never really talked about himself that much or shared a lot of stories about him. Of course, he would engage and talk about his life, but I always admired the fact that he just listened to other people's stories. And in fact, when my mom got laid off from her banking job after 40 years in the banking business or whatever, as they got older, and I don't think it was to earn extra income, but my dad must have been 55 at that time, and he went and got a waitering job at a restaurant. And I don't think it was for the money. I think it was because he liked people. He really wanted to be around people, and even that late in his age, he just wanted to be around people and serve people and listen to their stories. And I've always admired his ability to just hear people and listen and enjoy people's company. As I mentioned, my mom and dad were high school sweethearts, married at a young age. My mom, Cindy, she died almost exactly 10 years ago. And she was by far the love of his life. Again, they were together, gosh, I wish I knew the number, over 40 years of marriage, probably would have been pretty close to 50 years. But they just loved each other, and I'll never forget the moments that we had as families, and it was always just fun, and of course a lot of ribbing. That was our way. And again, Dad was always sort of the butt of the joke and could take it, and it was really it really gave me a sense of humor that probably isn't quite as good as Pop's, but I'll take it. We'd always vacation down at Fripp Island. That was our favorite spot every year. If you know that place, off the coast of South Carolina there, down by Beaufort. My mom set it up almost immediately upon leaving Fripp. One year she would be booking it for the next year, and so we would always go down there and had some pretty good memories there. Some of the best ones were the stories that Chris told. He had mentioned that you can get these bikes that have the huge air tires in them, and they're like tricycles, right, that you take out on the ocean. And as Chris mentioned, we got out there, and this is all Dad's idea. Yeah, let's get out there. We'll get some exercise. We'll get some sun. It'll be fun. We'll be out there. Well, we get about 2 miles out, what seemed like it. And of course, Chris and Dad are pedaling away, and we're all pedaling away, but not getting anywhere. We're not getting back in. And so after about 30 minutes of this, they had to pick the youngest kid to jump in the ocean, where literally, if you look down, it looked like a sea of jellyfish. I said, I'm not getting in there. Chris, you get in there. Dad, you're the strongest. You're the athlete here. Get in there. Nope, son, we're putting you in there. Get in there. For the life of me, I don't know how I got stung. I've never been stung by a jellyfish, too, by the way. And I that day especially, I'll never know, because they were just all around me, and I had to kick us back in, pushing the thing from the water while they sat cozy in the... So thanks for that. There was some times, recently I've been fortunate enough to travel in my business, and it all started a few years back where I secured a job in Hawaii. And once I was there, I was able to, I know that they would have loved to have come to Hawaii, so I booked a trip for them to come and visit, and that was a really great time to have them there, and for my mom and dad to be in Hawaii and enjoy that place. My mom wanted to be an airline stewardess, and so for that very reason, she wanted to be able to travel and do that thing. So it was really nice to be able to share that moment with them. But of course, while they were there, it wasn't without comedic affair. First day on the beach, I'll never forget it. They were staying at this hotel, and we all go down to the beach. I had some time off, so I was there with them, but it was probably the windiest day in Hawaii, as it often kicks up every now and then. And we're sitting on the beach, and my mom's relaxing, having a good time, and then the winds kick up, and it's just sand all in her face, all up on her the whole day. I mean, for hours, just sand. She's fighting the blanket and everything. And of course, my dad picked the right route, right? At least he thought. He said, I'm going to go play golf. In Hawaii and Maui, there's a famous golf course, Kapalua, and so he was all excited. He couldn't wait. He loved golf. We've played many rounds, me, Chris, and Bob and Greg as well, of golf. But this was my one dad's chance to play the famous Kapalua, so he goes up there, and we're all on the beach fighting wind and sand. My mom's having a miserable time, and I'm going, gosh, this is not the way I saw this going. So Dad was like, kind of lucky he ducked out of there. So he's up playing golf and got some great golf instruction. But about 3 holes in, as often happens in Maui, the weather changes pretty quickly, and an absolute deluge downpour of rain ensues while Dad is trying to play this famous course that he's been dying to play since he heard he was going to Hawaii. And he stuck it out, to his credit. It downpoured on him for a good part of 16 holes, and he just kept going. He said, I paid the money. I'm in Hawaii. He said, I'm going to play this course. And to his credit, he finished it. He came back soaking wet. My mom's dripping in sand and everything. So everybody was just like, I did not see this on the agenda. But nevertheless, they had a really good time and visited with me, and then took Chris over to see the memorial over in Honolulu and things. And that was a really special moment for us. Just a couple other moments I wanted to share. Dad always had these little nuggets that he'd throw out that you oftentimes don't know are little nuggets of wisdom and advice until after the fact. But I remember when I was running track, everybody who remembers the old McCants ball field, track field there is a big bowl, right? And so hills that come down, and you have the football field in there, and then the tracks around it. So this hill, and all the spectators would watch anybody who was running track. You'd sit on the hill, the grassy hill, and watch the track go down. And I ran the 1 mile and 2 mile, and I'll never forget, seared in my memory, the first lap or two. I was doing okay. I was running the mile, and it was probably maybe second or third. And then I'm running along, doing pretty well, and then out of the corner of my eye, I see my dad running down the grassy hill faster than I was alongside me to tell me, lift your knees, lift your knees, lift your knees. And I was so embarrassed, I mean, one, that it was my dad coaching me as we're running along. I'm in the middle of a meet here, and he's telling me how to run. But two, it was he was running faster than I was. But that always stuck with me. He said, lift your knees. And if you know anything about running, when you lift your knees, you get a longer stride because you're kicking your legs out more. And the other thing he mentioned too was when he ran cross country, that if he ran around a corner and the guy was far enough behind him that he lost sight of my dad around the corner, my dad would step on the gas, whether it was uphill, downhill, or whatever. And he always told me, he said, because when that guy comes around the corner and then sees me and I'm much further ahead, kind of tends to break their will a little bit. And so he was always happy to kind of stick it to people when he could. As far as track, he was very competitive and enjoyed that. The most recent and the last thing I'll say is we have the house in Greenville we moved him up to, and Chris, over the last 5 years or so. And he would always cut grass. I've seen the man cut grass for 40 plus years, right? And so, but it being sort of the property I was responsible for, I tended to do a lot of it. And of course, Chris and Pops were happy to sit and drink a beer watching me as I cut the grass. And I'll never forget, I had to change the gas out of the mower because I was cutting 2 lawns while they were sipping drinks and cutting up and sitting in the shade, watching me sweat. But I come over to fill the gas tank in the mower, and my dad said, "Why are you doing all this running around? You're cutting over here and you're cutting over there." And he says, "Why don't you just turn and cut?" And he said, "Cut the grass in front of you, Don't try to go over here and cut a little bit, go over here and cut a little bit. The normal motion is to come up and back and up and back and up and back." And he said, "But you can always go in a square, cut whatever is around you, cut the grass in front of you." And I thought to myself years later, that those two little nuggets of advice, lift your knees when you run and cut the grass in front of you. Both sort of alluded to that idea that just live in the moment that you're in. Be present in that moment. And if you're going to be present in that moment, make the most of it. And I think that's where cut the grass in front of you and lift your knees. If you're going to be running and you're going to try to win, maximize your effort. So those are the two nuggets that I got from my dad. And my dad, Andrew, Andy, Pops, he truly lived in the moment with patience and kindness and a beautiful ability to listen. And I'll take that with me for the rest of my life.